Ladies and gentlemen, this part never gets old. My name is Brian Ari. Welcome to Spirits Distilled at Fern Bar. Super excited to host you guys. Thank you for being here today. Today, we are going to be talking about one of my favorite categories, and actually the first category that I got really introduced to that helped inspire Fern Bar, which was sugarcane distillates, right? So we're going to be talking predominantly today about rum, right? What makes rum, what rum is, why it's delicious, why it's wonderful, why half of the program is focused on it, problems that are existing in the category, where it comes from, how it's made, types of the distillates, and then also how to pick your rum. We're going to talk a little bit about classifications, right? I went to the TTB's website. They are the governing body here in the United States that goes ahead and talks about what things are, what we recognize them as. So I pulled up whiskey really quick, right? Spirits distilled from fermented mash or grain at less than 95% alcohol by volume, having the taste, aroma, and characteristics generally attributed to whiskey, because that's specific, and bottled at no less than 40% alcohol by volume. Now, let's look though, inside of the whiskey category, they break it down and this thing scrolls for 3 pages. You've got bourbon, you've got rye, you've got wheat, you've got malt. You have bourbon, whiskey produced in the US at not exceeding 80% alcohol by volume from a fermented mash of not less than 51% corn and stored not at more than 62.5% alcohol by volume in charred new oak containers, right? That's specific as hell. What do you think rum has for its definition? Because if we've got bourbon, if we've got rye, we've got wheat, we've got malt, we've got so many different kinds of rum on this back bar. We've got so many different places that they come from. How do you think rum's defined? Because definitely these are the details, right? That's what matters. Let's look at rum, because you would expect there to be many, many styles. General type definition, blank. Type, no type under this class. General class definition, spirits distilled from the fermented juice of sugarcane, sugarcane syrup, sugarcane molasses, or the sugarcane byproducts at less than 95% alcohol by volume. Holy shit, that's more than Everclear, right? Basically. Having the taste, aroma, and characteristics generally attributed to rum and bottled at no less than 40% ABV. With no other types. Now, this is what makes rum really interesting inside the United States, right? We can have a product like Malibu, which we're going to cover in a different class. It is a rum liqueur, right? It has got a sugarcane distillate at the base of it, and about half of it's sugar. And a shit ton of other additives, fake flavors snuck in there. And you're going to find that in the same section that you're going to find this first rum that we're tasting today. That's nuts to me. It's also crazy to a bunch of producers throughout the world. So, in order to help you kind of theorize what rum is and how we think about it at Fern Bar, we're going to talk about styles of rum based on who colonized who. Because the colonizer then also had their own specific style of rum. The English had their own style of rum. The Spanish had their own style of rum, and the French developed their own style of rum. All very different, all relatively similar. Any guesses on what this first rum is for the rum nerds in the room? Potentially Spanish. What other kind of styles do you think this could be? Anyone who thinks it's a Spanish style rum? I've taught you nothing about this, so there are no wrong answers right now. You got a couple Spanish style. Who thinks this is a French style rum? We got 2 more. And who thinks this is an English style rum? Basically the rest of the class. Well, if you thought this was an English style rum, you are correct, and I'm disappointed in you two. Your palates are This first rum is Probitas. Now, this may historically be one of the most important rums of all time. Why? Because this is an English style rum, but what the English would do, and the Dutch actually would do quite frequently, is they'd go into these islands, right? And they would pick rums and bring them back to their home country, and then they would blend these rums together into a product, release it, and then sell it throughout their colonies, right? This is the first time in the Caribbean's history that 2 distilleries, 2 distinct islands, work together to create their own blend without any colonial influence, right? So this is a blend of Barbadian rum and Jamaican rum from the Four Square Distillery in Barbados and the Hampton Distillery in Jamaica. This is incredible. This is something that, well, this is wrong, my apologies. Say that slide did not make it in translation. So this is gonna be a blend of 2 rums sitting at 47% ABV, coming, like I said, from Four Square and from Hampton. This is a blend of column still as well as pot still rums. And this also is really incredible because it has some aged rum in it and some unaged rum as well. So this is a great baseline for an English style rum. So let's go ahead and taste rum number 2. English style rum. These are going to be made on the islands of Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Tobago. Looking at the U.S. Virgin Islands and the Virgin Islands in general, St. Lucia, Antigua, Demerara, Mauritius, as well as some U.S. distilleries. If you ever see Privateer predominantly makes English style rum. Privateer produced here in the United States. You can find it over in Kansas. We are trying to get it inside of Missouri. I think it's almost there if it hasn't crossed the border yet. Now, why does this matter? English style rums are going to be using molasses, not fresh cane juice, but molasses. And then they're going to be using a pot still. Now, who here knows what a pot still is? About half the class. Who here thinks they could describe to the class what a pot still is? We got it. Okay, perfect. I like this. Now, why does this matter? We're in the Midwest, all right? So we're going to reduce it down to Midwest terms. Think about a pot still like a crock pot, all right? Yep. So crock pot, we can cook in it one time before we have to clean it, right? And we've got a heating element at the bottom. We got a nice little lid on the top, right? Whenever your food's done, you pop the lid off, you get inside, and you hopefully scoop it out on a plate, but you can't eat it straight out of it. Now imagine if instead of having our crock pot with a lid on it, we pop a little still head as the lid on top of our crock pot here, right? So we're gonna put in our fermented molasses right now, right? In the juice. We're gonna put in that fermented molasses juice inside here, and we're gonna heat it up. At about 172, 173 degrees Fahrenheit, that alcohol reaches its boiling point, and it's gonna start to rise up, right? Eventually, it's gonna rise up and either hit the wall and trickle back down, or make its way all the way up to what's called the swan's neck. You can see kind of why it's called that. It looks like if a swan was sticking its neck out like that. You get the idea. That eventually will fall down over here into what's called a condenser. All this is just a colder environment where that vapor can then come back to a liquid state, go down this nice little coil, and we can then put it into a barrel, or we can put it in cement tanks, or we can put it in stainless steel or glass or whatever we want to catch it in. But this is essentially the process. After the first time you cook it, it's coming out a little bit above 20% ABV. You then want to cook it again, and then it'll come out a second time. But remember, it's like a crock pot. This isn't a continuous thing. We do it once, we got to clean the inside. Now, why would we do something that's so inefficient? Flavor's the answer. You get a lot of flavor out of copper contact. You get a lot of mouthfeel and richness and oils that would get stripped away in the next kind of distillation we're going to talk about. But let's talk about this rum, all right? What are you guys tasting in this rum specifically?
Toasted coconut.
Toasted coconut. Caramel, nailed it.
Caramel toffee.
Caramel toffee.
Tastes like rum.
Tastes like rum. A little chocolatey. Are we talking like dark chocolate, milk chocolate?
Dark chocolate.
Creme brulee, that creaminess, that sweetness. Anyone else get dark cherry? Like if it's dried, you know what I'm saying? Now you get dark cherry. I can also say chocolate cake, like a nice moist chocolate cake, and boom. Incredible, right? Pastry-esque. So I went ahead and we took the first one, which was both Hampton and Foursquare. We're just gonna go into Foursquare today and talk about their product, Real McCoy 5-year. So this is 43% alcohol by volume, right? So it's still a nice warm feel, but not too hot. Aged for 5 years, which any of you bourbon drinkers, any of you Scotch drinkers are gonna look at this and you're gonna be like, 5 years is not a whole lot. Well, it has to do with where it's aged. In the tropics, things are gonna age 7 times faster than if it had happened in Scotland. So this is gonna see the same amount of wood sugars, tannins, lignans, all of the flavors from a barrel that you would get over the course of 35 years, right, in Scotland. And this is at a hell of a steal of a price when we compare it to what a 35-year-old Scotch would be. So that day-night heat swing, right? And also the fact that you've got that ocean air constantly circulating air around, right? And that's helping those barrels, the heat especially is helping those barrels swell, and that pushes out that alcohol into the barrel, and at night it sucks it in, right? And that's where you get that flavor, right? barrels are flavoring agents. They're kind of like just big tea bags that hold the liquor in, and as it expands out into it, it absorbs more flavor, and then it contracts at night and it squeezes that flavor back into the barrel, right? Or into the juice that's inside the barrel. We're gonna get out of our English style rums now, right? And we're gonna go ahead and move over into our Spanish style rum. So let's go ahead and grab rum number 3. What are you guys tasting? I haven't taken my second sip yet. Figgy datey. Viscosity is different. Is it thicker, thinner? Thinner. Nailing this. Smoked paprika. Vanilla marshmallow, absolutely. Kind of like a really milky latte. Tab? Bananas Foster. Tab was saying that he hated this rum a whole lot, and I'm really curious as to what you think it is.
It's just water. Like the texture thing is the big point of it.
But it's pretty light, right?
Yeah, I'd say the rum is very different than it.
So this is a hallmark characteristic of Spanish style rum. So it has to do with the kind of still that's used inside of it. Tab, I really want to know what you think this rum is.
I think this is Don Q Añejo.
Don Q Añejo. We'll find out here in a second. So Spanish style rum. These are going to be made in Puerto Rico, Cuba, the Dominican Republic. You're going to also find it coming out of Guatemala and Venezuela predominantly. All right. Now, what's interesting here is they're still using molasses like our English style, but they switched stills. They're now using a column still. What is a column still, you might ask? Well, it's complex. Okay. Now, there was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Coffee who invented this style of still, and this is a continuous still. It looks really, really complex, but we're just gonna start where we get what is called the cold wash, right? The wash is the stuff that you dumped into the crock pot, and now imagine you have it on a hose, right? And there's some pressure behind it, so you can continue to run this all the time. So the cold wash comes up and in, all right? It goes into, remember the condenser on the other side? This is actually brilliant technology. They run the cold wash through a little tube right here, and later the hot steam, the hot alcohol vapors are gonna come and actually condense on this side, which is brilliant. But what happens is that cold wash comes in. It then gets pumped up to the top of our still right here, where we're gonna talk about in Midwest terms what this thing is. Everyone knows what Quaker Oats containers look like, right? You got a cylinder, all right? It's made out of cardboard, got a plastic lid on the top, got a little lid on the bottom, you got your oats on the inside. Open that baby up, dump the oats out, all right? Flip her over, put the lid back on, and now make the entire thing out of stainless steel. Take that lid, we're gonna put like 15 of them on the inside, like you can see, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 15. Then we're gonna poke holes on the inside. On that little lid, we're gonna call them plates now. We're gonna poke holes on every single one of those plates, aside from the top one, because we wanna keep that connected, right? What's gonna happen is, that cold wash is gonna fall down through these plates where it reaches the heating element here at the bottom, right? What happens when it reaches the heating element? It starts to warm up, and at what? 172 to 173 degrees Fahrenheit, the alcohol reaches its boiling point, and it rises up, and then it hits that first plate. And what happens? It condenses and it falls back down. Then what happens? It continues to rise and fall and rise and fall until it's heated that plate up enough to where it can start to bubble out those little holes that we poked in earlier, right? And then it hits the second plate, and what's it do? Rise, fall, bubble up. What is happening every single time this goes through each plate? Another round of distillation, right? Inside of our copper pot, we only had it rise up, fall to the other side, collect it, clean it, put it back in, rise up, come down the other side, collect it. So we go through 2 distillations, but I could have 2 distillations happening inside of 2 plates here, or I could have 15 distillations happening. This is why if you see, a vodka 8 times distilled, we're just going through 8 plates. Remember the hose that we were talking about coming in and dumping in the cold wash over the top? That's not a one-time thing. That runs continuously. Imagine turning on your spigot to your hose, right, outside. You got that garden hose just going in the top, and it is continuing to trickle down at a speed that matches the speed, roughly, of the alcohol that's coming back up. So this thing can run continuously because it's constantly got enough cold wash coming in that these are just getting barely hot enough for that alcohol vapor to come up and hit the next plate and go through the process, right? And what's really neat, if you go to Lifted Spirits and you're there during a distillation day, they actually have got a section of their still that's made from like really thick glass. So you can see it in action. It's amazing because you'll notice like plate 1 and 2 might be bubbling and you can see them boiling and they're going crazy, and plate 3's got a little activity but not a whole lot. right? But then if you give it long enough, that'll get crazy, and then it goes to plate 4. And it continues all the way up, and the entire thing's alive, and you can see the process. It's beautiful.
Which plates are gas?
What was that?
Which plates are gas? Which plates are gas?
It just depends. So eventually this will all turn into a cycle of liquid trickling down and gas coming up. So it goes continuously, right?
Because if you cool that plate too much too early, you never have a full tank.
Bingo. So that's why distillation is quite a science, because you have to match your flow rates properly as well as enough heat so this actually happens. So eventually what happens here, remember how we've got the cold wash coming up and through going down, vapor coming up? It then comes up here, drops in over to this section right here where it condenses, but it's so hot enough that it then rises up, hits all of these guys, and there's a catch right here where eventually that vapor comes up, it condenses, falls on, and can come out the side here, or it can come up and over. It just depends. A lot of these are designed a little bit differently, but this is the general theory behind it. You harvest the cane, and either you press the juice out of it for French style, which we'll get to in a second, or you then take that, turn it into we go through the sugar refinement process. Molasses is a byproduct of that, right? So you capture the molasses. Remember that for later when we talk about the dark history of rum and the terrible things, the reasons we have rum and why it's awful. The sugarcane juice or molasses is then fermented, right? We take that, mix it with some liquid, ferment it, and then what happens? We distill it, either with our column still or our pot still. We can then age it, or you can just bottle it off, right? The first one we had both aged and unaged blended together. Heavy machinery, cutting down the cane, shooting that cane over into here. You can see the chunks. This is a press, I believe, coming out of Novofogo, which is a cachaça, which we'll cover in a different class because that's a whole other style of distillate. But it is crushing the cane. You see the juice shooting off. It's getting collected off the side. Right here, this is the fermentation tank where you get that molasses that's sitting and fermenting, right, inside of liquid. And this is the stuff that we put into our still. It looks disgusting. I promise you, it smells incredible, all right? I'm really impressed because Tav's got a great palate. This is Don Q Añejo Gran Reserva. So this is a Spanish style rum. This is 40% ABV, so lower than anything else we're gonna taste today and anything we tasted before it. Now, what's really interesting, this is a blend of rums at a minimum age of 9 years old. But this is made with a column still. So we're not getting as many of those like fatty oils coming over. We're not getting nearly as much copper contact, which means that there's gonna be less of that bold richness to it. And to me, this tastes like it went through quite a few plates, right? I know Don Q's production process decently. I would imagine that it probably did go through quite a few plates. Every time you go through a plate, you're redistilling. And what's happening there, you're losing congeners and esters, which are two giant flavor drivers. Too much of that stuff, you're gonna go blinds, but it's very important to have in there because it gives it flavor. So we're gonna go ahead and jump onto rum number 4, which is gonna lead us into French style of rum. Wildly different. It smells like lacto fermentation. I wonder why that could be. Oh, right off the rip, when I tasted this today, I was like, this screams passion fruit. Super bright acidity, the sweetness is there, but it's like so passion fruit in your face, it's incredible. What else do you guys get? Brown butter. Can't get over lacto. It's pretty, it's yogurty, right? It's really dry though too. Moldy. Yeah, that's definitely part of this style.
I've got wood notes.
Wood notes? Talk to me about your wood notes.
How much time you got?
Does anyone think this is really similar to the stuff we've been drinking? Good. Why is it not? Because it's made from cane juice, right? What's happening here is we're not using molasses anymore. We have transitioned into taking sugarcane juice, which is stupidly high in sugar content and also naturally ferments stupidly fast. So if you harvest your cane and you let it sit for a while, it's gonna start turning and fermenting already. If you juice it, it starts fermenting within a few hours, which is amazing and also terrifying if you're a distiller because You got to get that cane into the distillery, press it, and get it fermenting to then go into your still very quickly. As opposed to like molasses, we all have a jar that's been sitting inside of, you know, our fridge forever, and it's still good. It's pretty dense. It's not going anywhere. It's a relatively stable product, so it's much harder to work with. Now back over here, we're going to see this is cane juice. This is a column still, and generally speaking, French rum is produced on the island of Martinique as well as Haiti. We're not tasting any Claren today. That'll be part of a later class where we get into really crazy shit, and I can't wait to taste like through that class. It's really exciting. But this is going to be characterized as pretty light, grassy, and funky when it comes to the style of the rum. Classic rum brands that you'll see: Rum Clement, Rum JM, Neeson, St. James, Pierre Labatt, all very typical rums that you're going to see inside this category. We carry quite a few of them here at the bar. I would highly recommend you get yourself a little tea punch or something after this class. It's delicious.
Is this like,
So,
is it Clement Martinique?
Clement Martinique is a good guess. I will tell you this is from Martinique. So you're on the right island. Congratulations.
Aged Neeson.
Aged Neeson, maybe.
It's not Malibu.
Not Malibu. You won the class today. So this is Rum JM Terroir Volcanique. So this is really neat. This is this sugarcane is going to take the terroir of being next to a volcano, right? It's coming from spring water that's been filtered through volcanic rock. Sits at 43% ABV. Is aged in two different styles of American oak, which is actually really intriguing.
That's what I was picking up some wood.
So they actually, what's really cool is they have a cooper in-house, a guy that builds barrels. So they toast their barrels and they char their barrels, and then they blend them together, which gives it a really interesting characteristic. Toasted barrels, you're gonna get a lot more mellow toffee notes out of. Those charred barrels, you're gonna get like black cherry, you're gonna get caramel, you're gonna get your vanilla. But think more like pound cake and fruit cake out of like a toasted barrel. Those more like bourbon-esque notes out of a really densely charred barrel, because that's how bourbon's made, predominantly speaking. What's really neat, this is a blend of 3-year-old rums, right? So it's only 3 years old, but it's got so much flavor to it.
I'm sorry, you might have already talked about this. The cooperage on the site, you're saying, where's the distillery at?
In Martinique.
Martinique?
Yeah, they've got a cooper in-house. Yeah, so what I imagine they're doing is they're probably taking some used barrel, some fresh barrel, and then they are building. So a lot of times when you get older barrels, they're starting to fall apart, which is a giant problem in the category, like in just the rum world in general. Barrels start to fall apart after you use them. And so if you have a cooper on hand, they'll actually take staves out of different barrels and build fresh barrels, and then throw away the staves that are starting to like not be so useful anymore. Problems in the category. We're gonna jump back to this slide really quickly. General type definition. It is up to the importing country to legally determine what the thing's gonna be, right? So if we have Italian wine, for instance, a DOCG wine, a very hyper-specific set of rules that it has to abide by in order to be considered this level of quality, shipped out with that stamp on it, right? Champagne from Champagne, France. It's been, you know, it's champagne from Champagne, France, but then we can find California champagne. We can find mozzarella that's coming out of Italy, and then we can also find mozzarella made here in the United States. It's really interesting because a lot of times the United States won't respect the home country's rules on the rum that they're making. Classic, right? It's us. But they won't respect the rules of that the country that they're coming from. So they'll bring this rum in and then put it on the same shelf as Malibu. Obviously, this Terroir Volcanique is like way different, but it'll sit on the same shelf as a liqueur and be called the same thing and put lumped in the same category because there aren't types and there's no general type definition.
Like, it seems like
The TTB you think would invest a little bit more into this, and bartenders for the last 10, 12 years have really, and like people in the brand world have been really vying for like, hey, like let's kind of define this because it's a little insulting to the producers that are pouring their lifeblood and soul into this to then be put on the same shelf as a commercially, industrially produced product, right? So
It's kind of interesting though compared to the opposite we talked about with tequila. There was a lot of people here with tequila about how like limiting tequila can be based off of like location and region and there's like a lot of places in Mexico that make quote unquote swill that they can't sell anywhere, but it's like their regional delicious, amazing stuff that we don't have access to. And so it's like the balance between they've over-legislated tequila to where it's almost limiting, and then they are not legislating rum enough.
we got to recognize rum is basically a byproduct of slavery, right? This is part of the holy trinity of the slave trade. What would happen is slaves would be brought off the coast of Africa, dumped into the Indies where they would be traded for rum and then sold to rum producers to make rum, right? They then would be brought, that rum and more slaves, back to the Americas where exchange would happen and then get shipped over back to England, and it would create this vicious cycle. Fun little side note, in Pirates of the Caribbean, one of the cut scenes was Jack Sparrow talking about with one of the English captains or people in the Navy about why he was a pirate and had been branded one, and it was because people weren't cargo to him, and they were making him shuttle people as cargo. And so we have to remember, like, the slave trade, the reason that we know rum as it is today is they were getting shipped to sugar plantations where their life cycle, they're only expected to live about 27 years. Because the working conditions were so fucking terrible. It was already hot as balls in the tropics, and then they were working next to giant kettles, being underfed, beat basically to death. And what was the one byproduct that was getting produced that wasn't getting used at the time? Molasses. What would happen is they'd take this molasses, allow it to ferment, and they'd consume it as one of the only escapes that they had. And then guess what happened? British noticed that, and they're like, huh, that's interesting. In Jamaica, there are what are called dunder pits, right? Where they will take the leftover muck that's on the inside of a pot still, right? And they'll put them into pits that start microbial colonies, basically, and these all have different flavors to them. So they'll mix different amounts of this muck in to their next run of distillation, giving it specific flavors. Basically, like, yeah, sourdough starter. It's, yeah, basically sour mash, just on a completely different level. When they started to realize that the slaves were drinking and consuming out of these, they would throw dead animals, dead slaves into them to keep them from doing such. So quite literally, if we think about the historical impact that rum is having, like, this is based on slavery. And something beautiful came out of it, but it's impossible not to recognize. We have to recognize that here at Fern Bar because half our program's built on that. It's built on the backs of slaves, right? We're in America. All that's just built on slaves. So, like, 1 second for them. Now, going to rum number 5 though. This is not a problematic rum. This is delicious rum. Go ahead and take your taste if you haven't. I have not yet. As Jared was alluding to, what happens inside of rum in the United States is we can add sugar, we can add flavoring agents, we can add caramel coloring, we can add glycerin. One of my friends, Brandon Cummins, did a wonderful presentation where he did 2 drops of commercially available, like commercial grade food coloring, which is food dye, and took a completely clear spirit and turned it darker brown than anything that we have on our shelves, right? Why is this important to note? Well, because here in America, we think that an aged spirit should be dark, right? Most aged spirits, even if they sit for like 15 years, are coming out of the barrel somewhere straw colored, maybe a little bit into like the golden brown, but it's not getting anywhere near as dark as like Appleton 12 is probably a great example. I'm pretty sure they caramel color that one. And look at that, it looks dark. It looks like it has value to it because of that coloring. They can also add glycerin. What does glycerin do? Glycerin will take, not only will sweeten it, it'll also take all of the top funky notes, like let's say you had a bad batch, didn't turn out right, it'll hide them. It'll basically kill your aromatics, but what happens when you kill your aromatics with glycerin? Well, we need to add aromatic compounds back into this and make it smell more like rum. So let's add vanilla in there, let's add sugar into it, and let's go ahead and spice it up, right? Literally, spiced rum, it's a category. I'm not shitting on spiced rum, it can be good, but like we've all had too much Captain Morgan in our lives anyway. Right? And so it's really intriguing at the end of the day to think like, spiced rum is part of the reason they do that, but there are many other rum companies that will add a ton of things into it.
So which rum?
I've got 6 more minutes. So things I will point out, Cut and Dry, and so Planteray Cut and Dry, Planteray Stiggins Fancy, their pineapple rum and their coconut rum, those are both additive products. But I don't think those are bad products because they disclose that. They're like, hey, we're taking coconuts from the island of Barbados exclusively and adding those into our rum because we want this to taste like Barbadian coconut made with Barbadian rum. That's delicious. If you've never had Stiggins Fancy before, their pineapple rum it's really fucking good. It's a pineapple flavored rum, but with real pineapples, and it's great. And so when it comes down to it, knowing what you drink is what matters here, right? We have tasted rums that don't have any sugar added to them today, but sugar rum has history, right? There is historical reference in specific countries, like Diplomatico is a great example. It has got sugar added into it. It doesn't make it a bad rum, right? Know what you're drinking though. Know what you like, know what you're drinking. I prefer additive-free rum for the most part, but I mean, you'll still catch me grabbing a cut and dry and Coke, right? Because it's delicious. Like,
Had a cut and dry and Coke.
no, literally after this class, like after you've had some additive-free rum, go have some additive rum. Like, it's actually really tasty, right? But this is where in the category you have to be mindful about what you're drinking. Now, speaking of what we're drinking, what do you guys think rum number 5 is?
I approve. You want me to
I approve.
It's a guess which one it is.
Tell me what you're tasting first.
Rum chata.
Rum chata. Tasty, smoky, peaty. Anyone else get that hay? Smoked custard's excellent.
I've got a salinity.
Salinity, absolutely. There's a strong minerality to this as well. It's a little funky, it's a little grassy. It is a great guess on French. It is similar in style to French rum, but isn't exactly French rum. Out of Mexico, this is Pernibus Añejo. So this is a sugarcane juice distillate made in a copper still. Coming out of Mexico though. It's only 6 plates though, which is really intriguing. This is a copper still, 6 plates. It's awesome and delicious. Mezcal Vago, this is their passion project to try to keep indigenous cane species alive, which is awesome. And then it's aged in new American oak, which is really, really intriguing because that's way more expensive to do than if you use bourbon. How the hell do you pick it? Well, I would start with, go take a picture of the back bar, right? That's a very, very intentionally curated selection of spirits, right? But think about, you know the styles now, English, Spanish, French, so you know how to decode, okay, if this is coming from an English style, it's predominantly gonna come from these specific islands or these specific areas. If it's French, it's gonna be Martinique or Haiti, right? And it's gonna be a little more grassy, right? If it's coming from any of the Spanish islands, if you get a bottle of Havana Club from Cuba, that's going to be Spanish style. If you get Bacardi, Don Q, like those are coming out of Puerto Rico, or Artesano, you're going to know that is going to be more of that Spanish style, right? Generally speaking. So you know now kind of, if you look at least where these are coming from, what you should expect from them. Fire away on questions.
You said a 6-plate copper still. That's my question. What are the plates? Is that like a coffee style, but it's with copper?
Yep. So instead of having all these plates, there are just 6 of them, and instead of being made out of stainless steel, it's made out of copper.
So are you having to clean them in between sessions?
You can run this basically continuously for days at a time, and then take it apart and clean it.
Even if you're doing copper.
Even if you're doing copper.
But it's not 6 pots with plates. It's a column still made out of copper.
Made out of copper instead of stainless, correct.
You mentioned additives to molasses. Does that change the taste of it?
So additives in rum in general absolutely will change the taste. The idea here most of the time is like, if we're getting really low grade molasses and then we're throwing it through a column still to make it industrially and make it very cheap and very efficient. There are very many companies that do this. And then they'll sell to other companies. You get this very bland, tasting rum. No one wants to drink it by itself. That's where you start to put in additives. That's where you start to add things to make it taste better, smoother, right? Instead of this nasty, harsh white dog stuff that kind of tastes like vodka because it's so high proof, that's when you add things into it. Or if like a batch went wrong, add things into it, cover that up. Now there are very few producers that will do things the traditional way, not put in additives. We feature almost, not every, but we feature a ton of them that are available here in the market here at Firm Bar.
So because of like the lack of legislation, value-wise,
I wouldn't say it's due to lack of legislation that there's value in rum. It actually has to do mostly with the fact that if you're going after an aged product, that it is going to age faster in the tropics. So a lower age statement doesn't mean a lower quality. Higher numbers on bottles don't mean a thing, right?
No, not
Yeah.
it's accessible.
Yeah, it's not nearly as sought after. So one of the reasons I got into rum specifically, you can get, when I was, a poor bartender working at Manifesto, you could buy awesome rum and it was cheap, right? And it didn't cost a ton of money. And so for me, it's a huge value add. And also, although in the last 10 years or so, rum has gotten far more popular, you're still able to get amazing rum at way better prices than if you were buying bourbon, than if you were buying cognac, than even tequila and mezcal these days.
Supposedly here or thoughts
So this is actually something that's super sad. The question is, we in America don't traditionally drink rum by itself. Why is that?
Because we're stupid.
Because we got stupider, actually.
We got dumber.
Believe it or not, as many things as I think the founding fathers got wrong, they were drinking shit tons of rum.
Right.
Like, shit tons of rum. It wasn't until we actually got a giant wave of Irish into the country that grain-produced whiskey actually started to become a massive thing across the United States because A, it's a very fertile land to grow grain inside of, B, they are experts at distillation. The Irish and the Scottish were just leagues beyond where we were, which is amazing, and they brought that technology over and their knowledge with them. And then corn was grown super, super easily and got subsidized by the US government. So then bourbon became our drink of choice here in the United States. Neat rum is delicious. I would highly advise if you're after a neat rum, go after Foursquare, the Exceptional Cast series. I won't name too many names, Captain Morgan, and a few other of his friends. But what happens here is there are some rum brands, Captain Morgan and a few others, that are subsidized by the US government. Right? That are, right? Doge is cutting so many things, but why not that? I get political in this class. Now, here's my thing. They are subsidizing this rum's production, which is making it so much less expensive to us as consumers because the government's footing the bill with your tax dollars on producing really shitty rum. There's some great trade-offs that are happening here. We don't have that much time or else I'm already over. I would leave you to go do a little bit of exploration. I would start with Captain Morgan and US subsidies and why that is happening, right? It's an interesting little phenomenon that's happening because corn's been subsidized, that rum production's subsidized. There are a few other distilleries that are in territories that we control that are subsidized. Like, I'm not gonna shit on, like I said, Diplomatico has got sugar added to it, but historically, in their area, that's what they do. That doesn't mean that they're any less intelligent, that the rum is any less delicious. It just means it is what it is. So know what you're drinking. And also, if you're gonna make a daiquiri out of it, know that you have to add a little less simple syrup to it because it's already got some added, right? Or else you're gonna end up with a stupidly sweet daiquiri. Yeah.
So the last one was a Mexican rum. So is there a whole subsect of Mexican, South American, Central American?
And those are going to be in an upcoming class, and I can't wait to talk about it. Yeah, because we're gonna get into some funky shit. All right. It is in Mexico. Yeah, in Oaxaca and Michoacan, they're growing cane for sure. Actually, what's really nice is Charanda Europan is actually going around to farms that are going to single monocultural agricultural practices like growing avocados. They're saving cane varietals that would be going extinct otherwise, and then using it to make their Charanda, which is like massive. Mad shout out to Miriam. Love you, Miriam. I can't wait to see you again.